when you hire someone, you are looking at who that person is, how well they will fit into your organization, whether they can do the work, whether they have the potential to learn it if they don't have direct experience, and all of those things are hard to automate. And from a risk perspective, the employer is responsible for that employment decision no matter what tools they use. The employer's on the hook. If they're using tools that are making decisions, at least in the US, it looks like the tech companies may also be liable, but that never will get the employer off the hook completely.
You're very welcome to another episode of Hiring Excellence. I'm your host, Johnny Campbell, CEO and co-founder of Social Talents, and I'm really excited about this episode as I get to have a friend on who I hadn't seen for years up until a few months ago, and who I first met probably 15 years ago in London at one of Bill Borman's wonderful True London events. And we're going to be talking about something that, please bear with me, we're going to talk about AI, legal, privacy, and hiring in this 2026 world, and the legal implications of using AI and new tools and what's going on in the world of hiring, which may sound like a boring conversation to some of you, but trust me, we do not have a boring guest. We have a phenomenal guest. I'm joined today by our attorney in California, Heather Bussing. Heather is just the most knowledgeable but also interesting person I've ever heard speak on this topic, because I've said before, I don't like lawyers, but there's always exceptions. I love Heather. But it's the other lawyers I don't like, Heather. It's wonderful to have you on the show. The first time on the show, which I can't believe it. Heather, maybe tell the audience a little bit about who you are, what you do, add any color you want, because you're a colorful person.
Okay. Well, I've been practicing employment law for almost 40 years now. I know, it's amazing. I graduated from law school in diapers.
Obviously.
And about 20 years ago, I fell in love with the tech guy. And so I have been thinking about employment law and technology for all of that time. And I've been writing about it, and I get the privilege of finding and asking really smart people and learning from them when I have silly questions about how all this works. And I've also been a law school teacher for about 20 years. So what I try to do is help everybody else understand the stuff that I've been figuring out.
You're translating.
Because it's weird and mind-boggling and hard territory to make sense of.
Is it fair to say that so much of it is different and so much of it's the same?
Yeah.
All at once.
Yes, exactly.
Well, Heather, for context, who do you work with? What type of folks do you advise? Is it companies representing their legal interests? Is it vendors? Is it everybody? Is it individuals? Like, where does this expertise generally come from? Or where is, give us a steer on what your day looks like so we can understand who you're talking to, who you're advising.
Yeah, I wear many hats. So for employment law, I have a whole bunch of small businesses and some medium-sized that I try to keep out of trouble. Mm-hmm. And then on the tech end, I do a lot of sort of special projects involving compliance where tech companies hire me to explain things and create mid-funnel guides or do a webinar or do anything. And I love that because I have access to all these smart people that I get to interview. And so, I get to figure out what I want to learn and then propose a project and then go ask people who know. And it's the best. It's absolutely
I love this. I probably should have prefaced this by saying none of this is legal advice, and certainly not outside the state of California. Take what you may from this. and any other legal explainer I need to put on Heather's conversation. It's a chat between two friends. Let's call it that.
Yeah, yeah.
That's listening in
I'm a
on.
lawyer, but I'm probably not your lawyer.
There
So
you go. Not my lawyer, not your lawyer. We hope. Well, there's some people out there that might be. Well, to set the scene, Heather, right? Um, let's talk about the legal framework in hiring that has changed in the last few years around AI. And maybe a good place to start is the EU AI Act. And maybe can you give me a view on what is that a good place to start? What else is happening? Maybe, for those, let's assume, who are doing international recruitment and they may recruit across multiple jurisdictions, not just one state, not
yeah,
just one country. Can you give
yeah.
us an overview of the legal framework around AI and hiring globally? Some of the key players are pieces of legislation in that. And then maybe we'll move to commonalities or threads you see between all these different countries or regions and how they're proposing legislation and law.
Yeah. So the EU AI Act is there was just a delay in when it goes into effect for HR. Now it's December 2027. It was going to be August this year. But they have been working on this for almost a decade, I think.
The
Um
Europeans were great.
yeah. Well, but they're wrangling, cats, right? Because they have so many different countries and it's very much like the United States with all the states.
Politics, Heather. It's always politics.
Yes, 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 exactly. So, but wisely, I think they have classified hiring as a high risk, highly sensitive area, which requires the most guardrails
Um,
for using because it affects people's jobs and careers and livelihoods and ability to pay the bills, and that affects the economy and that affects everything else. So I think rightly so, they're looking most closely at the types of decisions that get made, and hiring is one of the huge ones. Um, and they're requiring some understanding of how it works and having a human in the loop before a decision gets made. So the closer you put AI to an actual employment decision, the risk goes up logarithmically. I mean, it's just and at the same time, employers are just drowning in avalanches of applications and resumes because AI also makes it very easy to apply.
It
So,
does. It does.
and then, we have the economic elements that the US, I believe, is in a recession, and so that always increases the number of applications organically, just because there's more people looking for jobs, especially in tech right now, because tech is going through its own, I don't know, midlife crisis.
Let's call it a wave for the moment.
Yeah.
Label it. It's a wave of some description. It could be a tsunami. It could be a nice gentle wave on your vacation. Who knows, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are multiple interests, that are at stake here,
But
but
you mentioned
yeah.
the US and you were talking about the EU. But surely, if I'm in the US, I don't give a damn about what the EU is doing or anywhere else in the world. So what's happening globally? Because some people might go, "That's just not for me. I don't have to care about what the European Union's doing." So is it just the EU, or what else is happening and where?
It's everyone. I mean, Colorado has adopted a similar framework as the EU, and other states have specific laws about different applications. So in New York City, you can't use AI in interviewing. There's just and more states will follow, and some states never will because that's how it works here. But but the other thing to know is that when you put a job posting out in the world, you do not know who is going to respond.
Hmm.
And especially if it's a remote position or you do business in the EU, you have to be prepared for the fact that you are subject to the EU AI Act, whether you're in Kentucky or Kansas or Kathmandu, you know. So um, you have to look at uh, who may apply to this job, because if it's some place that has laws that regulate, then you may be subject to that and you don't even know it.
There has been a perception, certainly was a couple of years ago, that the EU AI Act and other legislation being put forward in different states and parts of the world says that you can't use AI in recruiting. I think increasingly people realize that's just not true. So, how would you frame it instead, Heather?
You can use it as a tool in your recruiting process. You cannot allow it to make decisions alone.
Okay. So, is it binary? Because some people try and approach this framework as a binary. Give me the list of things I can do. Give me the list of things I can't do. I don't think you see it that way from a legal or probably any lawyer. How would you recommend we approach it instead of seeing it as a binary? Give me the list of yes and no. How should we think about it instead?
As a tool that can help you. But I think we also probably need to clarify what we're talking about, right? Because there's lots of AI that has been embedded in HR technology for decades. It used to be called big data.
Mhm. Remember that?
So machine learning has been around for a very long time, and we have used it for a very long time to detect patterns, to get insights. For people analytics runs on that. So it's not anything that's new. What's new is the idea that we can put these systems in place and let them do work without our review, because it is possible.
Good.
And we've had hiring tech that ranked people, that said, this is the most qualified to the least qualified, or this is the best fit to the and and those programs are extremely influential on humans looking at the data, because when you're faced with a stack of resumes this high, you're not gonna go through all of
Re-
them. You wanna know which ones are, the most likely matches.
So there's a real challenge there in terms of there's a pull from the market to your point around volume, markets in recession, tech industry bubbles or waves, etc. as well. So you see the need for different tooling, and we all see the need for different tooling to do this. And as you said, it's not a yes no necessarily. It could be that the risk increases, as you say, logarithmically as you go closer to a decision and you're using tools.
Right.
So give me some examples of the extremes. Where do you think it's becoming more evident that the risk is really high? And where do you think that's becoming more evidence that the risk is quite acceptable? If you can I give that comparison?
Well, the example that I'm puzzling with right now is, um, pre-interview sorting,
Mhm.
right? So figuring out who to interview. And there are a lot of tools out there that will do that in different ways, based on different things, and they do an amazing job with what they have, but the employer cannot control really what's on those resumes and whether, um, you're getting an accurate read of who someone is. And you've done recruiting all your life, and you can look at a resume, and your take on it is going to be much more complex and nuanced than a machine who's just assessing and matching,
Mm,
right?
mm.
And so that's what we're trying not to lose in this process. And, but I think the only way you can get a machine to actually do that is if you are super clear about what the work is, super clear on what you need in a candidate to do that work, um, and the applications can be parsed to that level. And I think all those 3 pieces are missing. Because the reality is that recruiting job descriptions are not like other job descriptions. They don't, they're advertising, they're marketing. They're not the work. They don't actually describe necessarily what skills and abilities and experience. And then humans have taken shortcuts for skills and experience and qualifications forever. What school did you go to, or what, so bias flows in, and then all of this data is based on what's happened in the past, which is based on human decisions and machine assisted decisions, and we're not always good at it. We're just not.
But, but, but,
Um,
but but where do you see maybe on the other side? You mentioned job descriptions, writing the job descriptions, doing outreach, following up with candidates, automating, the rejection messaging after a human made the decision. Those types of things. Do they feel safer, more rigorous, more likely to uphold, be
yeah.
upheld in terms of justifying AI to do those things?
Sure, sure. The sorting is really difficult.
Mm.
Communications, having LLMs, write little emails, that's all good. Having them send out responses, thank you. That's great, but they shouldn't do that automatically.
And this is a challenge that you hear candidates going, I got rejected at 2 a.m. on a Saturday night. It wasn't a human. This doesn't feel right. Who
Right.
the heck
And
is rejecting me on a Saturday night at
right,
2 a.m.? Uh,
right.
which is just idiotic and again makes people angry. But
It
when you look
does.
but when you look at this, right, like you made a point when we were discussing this in Chicago that there's a lot of focus on the AI part, but it kind of loses the tree from the woods, so to speak, where you kind of go, this actually just is about general hiring risk that we've always had and accountability for decision making. Explain that argument you made in Chicago to the audience around how this shouldn't just be about AI.
Right. Well, and you can steer me back if I'm off, but I'll go with what I'm thinking about.
Sure.
Um, so so when you hire someone, you are looking at who that person is, how well they will fit into your organization, whether they can do the work, whether they have the potential to learn it if they don't have direct experience, and all of those things are hard to automate.
Mm.
Um, and from a risk perspective, the employer is responsible for that employment decision no matter what. No matter what tools they use, the employer's on the hook. So if they're using tools that are making decisions, at least in the US, it looks like the tech companies may also be liable,
Mm.
but that never will get the employer off the hook completely. And if you want to figure out how and whether some who's going to be liable, you have to know what caused the decision. What was a material factor in making that decision? And so one of the problems with the pre-interview sorting of candidates is that you are automatically excluding many, 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 many people by pulling the cream up to the top. And that's where all of the human focus is going to be. But there will always be somebody who was perfectly qualified that you missed
Mm.
because of either your tools or their presentation. And so it's never going to be perfect. And so it's really a risk management situation. But in trying to understand what's causing it, it's always going to be a combination of factors.
Mm.
and we don't understand exactly how the pattern matching inside some of the tools um, made the result that it made. And then we are fundamentally extremely lazy and or efficient, depending on how you're looking at it, creatures who naturally want to get out of things that are boring and difficult. And so we would love to outsource responsibility for this work. And that's not what the legal frameworks are doing, and that's not really what we need to be thinking about and caring about, that it's everything's changed and nothing's changed, and the thing that hasn't changed is how do we find the right people?
Yeah.
How do we find the right people?
Two words
And
keep, and in that, right? Two words I keep hearing in these conversations, are defensibility and transparency. So maybe they're not the right two words to pick, but I keep hearing people talking about this. How do you see those two words in the context of this conversation about, AI use and hiring processes? And I mean them as, good words: defensibility,
yeah, yeah,
transparency. Is there a
yeah.
lack of that? Do they help? Are they the only things? Um, give me your thoughts on that.
It's It's lawyers who don't really understand technology helping legislators come up with rules that are really hard to apply. I mean
Fair. Yeah, fair.
rules are hard.
Yeah.
Rules are really hard, and technology is all rules. It's all rules. It's
Mhm,
rules and math and fancy
mhm,
computing.
mhm. Fair, fair.
And so you're always going to have risk. There is absolutely no way to eliminate risk. But some of the things that you can do is have experienced people, know what they're doing and monitor outcomes. Monitoring outcomes is huge, and run
Mm,
those bias audits. Who are you hiring with these tools and how does that work out? And are you hiring all gay Black women, or are you hiring, whatever? But you will start to see it in your outcomes, and that doesn't eliminate the risk, but once you see that there's an issue there of bias, you can go back to your tech provider and your own processes and see what you can do to fix it. But but causation is gonna be an absolute nightmare to figure out in these cases. It's bad enough with humans, but the thing that has increased the risk exponentially as well is the fact that it's all on the record now.
mm,
It used to be I made this decision because I really liked this person and they were qualified and I thought they would be fun to work with and the team loved them and there were many good people and I chose this one because they just were going to be a little better, I thought. And that's defensible. That is not a biased or discriminatory decision, but it might be, if overall, you never hire Hispanic people or you never hire Black people, um, and even that, depends on the qualified workforce in your realm of who could be hired for this role, and that realm gets very, very large if it's a remote position,
heck yeah.
potentially. So it's, the rules are always way behind the technology. And so there's a big gap there. And then we don't really know that much about how our decisions are made even by people. Um, we just don't.
We don't. People are terrible at this. People hold AI to a standard that no human would ever be held to.
Well, exactly, exactly. And what my beloved is constantly arguing with me about is, well, what if the AI is less biased
Mm,
than the humans?
mm,
Wouldn't you want that? And there's this same argument for autonomous cars, right? What if they have a lower accident rate?
But they still kill some people. And that,
But they
I think
still kill some people.
society doesn't accept that. They're not happy that, well, somebody died and a machine caused it, and we made the decision to turn the machine on. It comes back to a human, so therefore let's undo that decision. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think I'm hearing you say though that, in your opinion, generally, and this is of course could be different in different courses, different judges, different jurisdictions, but generally, making the effort to show that you've tried to look at things like disparate impact, etc., will go in your favor, showing that you've put the effort in, that you measure more things, you've tried to look at these things, you push back, you put the work in. As you said, there's no way of completely exonerating you from any responsibility. You're on the
Right.
hook for
You're
hiring
on the hook.
decisions, period.
Yeah.
But a responsible approach to testing, trying to remove bias, looking at disparate impact, looking at those data groups, going back and show you make changes to your process over time. It's not about trying to be perfect. It's showing that you have an effort to try and make sure you're doing your best. Would that be fair as
Yeah.
a recommended approach?
Yes. And legislatures are starting to catch on to this.
Mm,
So, the concept of safe harbors, where if you are the EU Pay Transparency Act is a great example of this. If you do your bias audits, you find a problem, you investigate that problem, you bring the employees to help you understand what's actually happening because leadership doesn't always know. Um, and you take action to correct it. Um, you have a certain amount of time to run that process and you're off the hook.
mm.
You're off the hook because there's an acknowledgement that that really is the best we can do.
And going back to car accidents, the aviation industry is famous for having this type of approach, I believe, where the FAA and others around the world allowed organizations, airlines that would admit to uncovering the reason behind a mistake are not accountable as long as they do it within a certain amount of days of the event. And it drove a process where finding mistakes was encouraged. In fact, there was a
Right.
legal and financial reason to go find the problems as opposed to
Exactly.
putting your head in the sand. I do love this concept because there is a head in the sand approach. People going, let's just have nothing, right? And you hinted at this early on, I think, and I'm going to come back to it because if an organization, and many do, are kind of leaning on we just want to have anything in the process. You mentioned a point earlier that hiring decisions used to be made in a way that you couldn't really disprove someone's logic, but it's being recorded, and it's not just being recorded by the hiring companies. In fact, it's less likely to be recorded by the hiring companies. Someone else is out there using AI recording stuff, whether you like it or not.
Right.
What's the impact of that then in a world? If someone's trying to put their head in the sand going, we're going to ignore AI and not use it. It's being used in their hiring process anyway, isn't it?
Yes. 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 So you have to understand what your tools are doing.
Or
Um,
or even the candidates tools, the candidates on
yeah,
Zoom
yeah.
and Teams and everything else, and they're
Oh, yeah.
turning on their AI transcription tool, their cheating tool, it's
Oh,
there.
yeah, and it's all discoverable.
Mm,
Everything is on the record now.
mm.
Everything is on the record. And it what the approach to discrimination when I was getting out of law school was don't know anything you can possibly not know. We don't wanna know their gender. We don't wanna know their race. We don't wanna know that they're pregnant.
Mm.
It's like, and it was plausible deniability
Yeah.
was the approach, and I think there are still a lot of people that sort of have that mindset, and we're in a whole different world than we have been for a very long time.
Heather, our audience is largely leaders trying to get projects ahead. And the industry, the recruiting industry, really wants to embrace these new technologies. And they're often up against it with their in house counsel, legal risk committees, AI committees as well. So if you're a TA leader and you genuinely want to do the right thing, you're aware of the risks. You don't want to use AI in an irresponsible way, but you're struggling to get business cases approved, get it past the lawyers. What's your advice for dealing with legal minded folks internally, even to get them to see the perspective or to understand the risk better or even measure the risk for what you're doing? Like, how do you help the business adopt tools better with more transparency, with a better approach. From a lawyer's point of view, how would you advise the rest of us who don't
Yeah.
necessarily have that frame of mind?
Yeah, well, start by vetting your vendors, right? And you want to understand what data they're relying on, whether that data was created for this or something else, whether it actually works. Have they bias tested? What did they do to mitigate bias in the training data? How will they use your data? How will that all be combined? Will they be monitoring anything in the background to understand how your data is affecting the tool's use? So really, you know, working with them because they're all focused here and they're doing their best to try to address these issues. And then understand who's involved in your process and look for bias in that. I mean, we don't track who makes hiring decisions for
So
on a
true.
human level.
So true.
We don't keep those demographics. We have demographics for days on every candidate that applies, but we don't know who's making the decisions. And I talked about this in Chicago, but I would really like to see both the vendors and the employers track that data to understand if there is bias coming in because there is.
Mhm. Mhm.
Of course there is. We are wired to decide that everything is good or bad, scary or not scary. And one of the fundamental ways that that shows in the way we behave is that things that are like us and familiar are not scary.
Mm.
And things that are a little different require a little more work on our part to become comfortable and understand. And we're hardwired that way. But the law requires us to overcome it.
Your
Because
dogs are excited about
discrimination
that point,
is
aren't they?
bad. Discrimination is bad. It is not just illegal, it is morally wrong.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so we have to keep that in mind as well, that everyone deserves a chance, no matter who they look like or what's in their pants or who they love, right?
As an aside, do you see that and this is loaded, obviously, this question, do you see that, in call it the post DEI world, that actually we're moving that DEI conversation into just fair hiring? And it's kind of joining this conversation that's maybe driven by AI implementations, but actually it does just come down to fair hiring processes that you can demonstrate. You test for fairness, you have a fair process. And again, that comes back to kind of where the DEI effort came from originally, was just to bring more fairness to processes.
The DEI stuff has been political theater.
Hmm.
After George Floyd, there was a huge movement to try to help and just and reduce discrimination, especially in the places where it is prevalent.
Mhm.
Um, and but a lot of companies didn't really mean it. They just, did a bunch of stuff. And then they decided when it was politically convenient that that stuff didn't work because they weren't really trying. but 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 the reality is that these laws apply everywhere. The discrimination is still illegal in all of Europe, all of Canada, all of the United States, and each state has its own laws and further protections, and those laws are not going anywhere. I mean, the right to be free from discrimination is a fundamental human right under the UN Human Rights Charter. I mean, it's like this is we're not going to change this.
Mm. It's
And
fundamental.
if you want to retire now.
As long as you don't get biased against because you're retired, Heather. That's the other point. You brought up one other point, Heather, which was about trying to put yourself in the shoes of the lawyers slash AI counsel that are reviewing this, and understanding what they might need to make a decision. So talk me through some of your tips there, or perspective that non legal,
Yeah.
non-AI counsel folks can understand about you'd recommend?
Yeah, when you bring a proposal to add a tool, the CEO and finance just wanna know how much it costs and does
Yep.
it work,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Simple.
But legal is gonna go, "Ah, how does this increase the risk to the company?"
Mm.
And so they are going to be wondering, what how does it work? Does it work? Does it work better than people? What are our arguments? What data do we need to know about this tool? What monitoring, what analytics are we going to have to do? How much time is that going to involve? How many people? Um, and if the pitch is we're going to spend all this money, but we're going to make it back by not having people, you might want to rethink that because you really do need people in the loop and you need a whole new level of monitoring um, for these tools and somebody who's looking at what's happening.
I I'm gonna move shift to our AMA section, Heather. We asked our
Okay.
audience a couple of weeks ago for any questions they might want to throw at you, and I've selected just a handful of them here to throw at you to
Sure.
get your headline response, because we're not going to give legal advice on this for each
Yeah, yeah,
individual
yeah.
specific question, right? I want to start with maybe start with this one, right? And it's from Jim Riney. Jim's a good friend in Dallas with Friesen Nichols. And Jim asked, what people, organizations, or resources should TA professionals pay attention to for the best legal advice about the use of AI in the hiring process? And I think this was in the context of maybe something that Sherm posted, and to kind of go like, there's so much confusion and there's just different advice that conflicts. Where would you recommend we source our advice from?
I love there's a law firm called Zwilgen, Zwillgen, that specializes in technology law, and they are awesome, and they put out regular updates that are clear, easy to understand, have sources if you want to dig further. And this is what they do for a living. And I that's one of the first places I go to look.
I absolutely love this. Let me bring our second point here, right? I was judging for Career Crossroads recently on their AI awards and TA competition, and we had 20 something submissions from in-house teams who built their own tools. And we had a company who are known as Merck in Europe, but not in the US because it's not MSD. It's a different business in the US, but a huge life sciences business. And they had built a tool that was one of the things it did was it took the notes, interview transcripts, resume, job spec, and would compile a summary for the hiring manager when the recruiter chose to recommend them. So the recruiter said, "I want to recommend Heather." I'll go, great. Write a strengths and weaknesses document, and they roll this out in pilot. But when they were testing it, they noticed a few anomalies, and they realized that the tool was hallucinating some of the negatives, like in the cons section, so to
Right,
speak.
right, because
And what they dug,
they like balance.
well, it turns out in some candidates there were no negatives, but it felt compelled to come up with negatives because
Right,
that's what the
right,
prompt instructed,
because
and
you asked for it.
they asked for it, right? And they had to
Right,
rewrite it to say you were allowed to have no positives, you're allowed to have no negatives, and then there's no limit,
right,
and there's no minimum, there's no maximum, and they
right,
retested and that worked, right? I love that they put enormous amount of effort into actually this testing. To your point around,
right,
show you're working, show how it works, show you've tried to
right,
test things,
right.
right? And it drove a question from this hallucination aspect of LLMs. And it was Stephen Rothberg, who's the founder of College Recruiter. He was asking, if an employer is sued for improper use of LLM models, will they be adequately able to defend themselves by presenting that best guess audit trail, or will they essentially be admitting that they cannot satisfy their burden of proof and therefore are likely to lose? Right, that's your answer. Move on.
It's gonna be tricky, and we don't know how it works yet because nobody's done it yet, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But the legal system is going to want to dig into causation. And by the time something gets transposed from reality into a legal framework, It may or may not have anything to do with reality again anymore.
Yep.
And so, you know, keep the goal in front of you, which is what is the right hire for this role, and how do we find them in the most fair and best way possible? And so if, that's your defense. We wanted to hire the best people we could hire, and this is what we did to find them, and this is what we did to sort them, and this is what we did um, to interview them, and this is how we made the decision. But to the extent that you have automated tools in that process, you're going to have to explain how material those tools were to your decision, how much you relied on them, and how they work. And that's the part that we're all still sorting.
Isn't it awful? It forces us to hire responsibly, actually be accountable for our goddamn hiring decisions.
Now,
I have two more for you, Heather. This one I love, right? From Balash Lizan. He asks, what happens with keyword filtering in ATSs? Aren't these just silent and non-compliant AI decisions? And that sparked a big debate on the chat.
Yeah, I didn't read through that chat before coming, and I'm not sure I'm really qualified because I don't understand. AI is based on unstructured data. It doesn't play fetch like Google. When you put something in, it doesn't necessarily come back with everything related to that key word. And so maybe you have some insight about
Well,
this,
well,
but I don't.
my
Um,
read, Heather, was kind of going back to one of your earlier points, is that going, we've used keyword matching as a way to sort for years.
right,
And I think his
right.
point is like, how defensible is keyword matching? Like, okay, we're
Well,
talking about the AI stuff, but
not with LLMs, because it doesn't work that way.
no. But is it defensible in a non-LLM world as well? Like that we typed words in, only certain people came up. We know that, there are synonyms for different things and candidates get left out because they use a synonym that we didn't. Is that defensible?
Well, no, because it's really easy to fix that. I mean, SEO programs have fixed that for
Hmm.
decades now.
So again, back to kind of what's new is old, and what's
Yeah,
old is new, essentially.
yeah, but the ways our tools have worked is really, really fundamentally different now.
Yeah, I agree.
And we tend to grasp the way that we understand it. And so that's a shift for not only the technology, but also the humans using it and relying on it.
I'm going to finish on a Steve Levy question just for fun.
Oh, yes, just because of Steve.
Because it's Steve, right? Thank you, Steve. Take yourself back to the time. Now, this is going to be you got to imagine Steve and his voice doing this.
Oh,
Take it.
yes.
Take yourself back to the time when the founding fathers were debating the core constructs of the initial Constitution. What advice would you have given them if you had a portal into the present day maelstrom known as AI? Run.
Term limits for the Supreme Court. Um,
Yeah, I'd start there too. Yeah,
yeah,
that seems to be fair.
yeah. Clarify the Second Amendment. But I mean, of course, the rules are hard. Constitutions are even harder because you have to make them general enough to fit the situations that you can imagine at the time that you're making them, and specific enough so that you avoid unintended consequences. And this is why we have lawyers, because nobody can actually write rules that work all the time in every situation. And so it's a constant conversation of refining rules to match reality, and reality changing, and the rules having to catch up. And so here we are.
Heather, you've managed to reconvince me of the importance of lawyers and the fact that we're never getting rid of them. It's a good career to go into. Everyone's going to need them. It's safe. We're not going to be have our lawyers automated by AI, because people like Heather Bussing are needed in the world to make sense of this mess. As long as humans are writing the laws, we need lawyers to interpret them and make it all work.
Oh, and we really don't want AI writing the laws. No.
We do. Heather, thank you so much for joining me and sharing some of those insights with humor, with good advice. We're going to put together a pack of Heather's best advice and make it available in the show notes for you to download to get those top tips. And again, it's not legal advice. They're just comments, thoughts, musings between friends. Heather, thank you so much for joining us. I'm looking forward to seeing you again soon. I'll be over in California in October. So I'll make sure to hit you, John, up. I'll talk to you after the show about that. We'll get some time.
Perfect. Perfect.
Good to see you. And thanks for joining, folks. We'll be back next week with another great episode of Hiring Excellence. Until then, take care.